Welcome to Notable Approvals. I am attorney Amanda Shaffer. A very exciting case to talk about. I just got out of virtual court, so I'm excited to talk about this case. I've been waiting many years to talk about this case, actually. Before I do a quick reminder, don't forget to like us and follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, wherever you are watching. And if you find this video to be helpful or know someone who may, please hit that share button. I know it's a little early. I normally do these in the afternoon, but whenever I am fresh off a win from immigration court, I'm always really excited and want to talk about it. And this case was a doozy for sure. So I'm not going to get into all of this is an asylum case, but we actually ended up not doing an asylum case. It was much more complicated than that. So I'm not going to get into the entire, maybe I'll touch on the claim if it comes up. But for the most part, this case was about asylum fraud and what we had to do dealing with this. All of my clients in this case had green cards. In fact, one of them had already naturalized. That case got dismissed earlier. So the lead respondent here, so this is the person who filed the asylum application. So the reason this entire family got asylum was based on the mom's claim, and the husband and the three children were all derivatives. And this was back in 2010. So they entered the country with visitor visas in 2009, applied for asylum early 2010, and was granted by the asylum office. A year later, about when they were eligible for their green cards, they all filed for their green cards, and they were all granted. Then, at least 3 of the family members applied for naturalization. And I've said this before in my lives, and I'm unfortunately going to have to say it again, that when there's problems in cases, a lot of times these problems are found out at the naturalization stage. And I am not by any means trying to frighten anyone from filing for citizenship. In fact, I think that it's the opposite. I always recommend filing for citizenship if you're eligible. But if there is anything in your case that you might not even know sometimes, and again, I'm not trying to scare you. My job is to help people file for citizenship, and I really do enjoy doing that. But it's just something to keep in mind. If there's a known problem in your case, you should check with a lawyer before filing, because you may end up in a position like this. In this case, the clients were going to get placed in removal proceedings inevitably when they filed for naturalization. They had no way of knowing it. So the reason why is well, let's start by saying, I think I said that mother, the lead respondent, native of Ceylon, which is now Sri Lanka, which is where they're citizens of. So that country name has changed. So the mother actually, her birth certificate says the other country. And like I said, there's a husband and 3 kids in this case, and that they're all permanent residents. And we filed the motion to dismiss for the son a while ago, and in removal proceedings, a U.S. passport, birth certificate, or naturalization certificate is prima facie evidence that you're a U.S. citizen. U.S. citizens can't be in removal proceedings. That was easy, except there's the concern about denaturalization, which is the process of the government literally suing you to take away your citizenship, and it has to be based on fraud. Now, we kind of debated, especially when they were placed to removal proceedings when Trump took over, should we file this now or wait, because are they going to try to denaturalize him? But based on the case law that we saw, he didn't make even if there was fraud, he had nothing to do with it. He was just a rider on the application. His mom listed him at that time. He was, a minor. So even if mom committed fraud, doesn't mean the son committed fraud, although his grant of derivative asylum was based on fraud. So it can get confusing, but luckily we didn't have to deal with that because there was no fraud here with my clients. However, they had the unfortunate fate of hiring this attorney who ended up getting indicted for immigration fraud along with several other attorneys and paralegals, and eventually pled guilty to immigration fraud. And this was kind of happening around when they were trying to naturalize the indictment. They were actually, it might have even been just under investigation. And this is actually such a notorious case. It was one of the biggest immigration fraud or asylum fraud busts in the country, in the history, that it was actually called Operation Fiction Writer, because they would make up these fake claims for people. Now, here's the one problem. If you ever look up Operation Fiction Writer, you're going to say, didn't Amanda say these clients were from Sri Lanka? Because all I can see is things about China. And you'd be very correct that the bulk of these fake claims were from China. Now, there were Sri Lankan claims that came in after the fact that may or may not have been fake, but even the FBI's interviews with the people who worked there said that usually the Sri Lankan cases were more likely to be real. And on top of that, the government handed me this packet of evidence, and it included the indictments for this attorney and people who worked in the office, this interview I'm referring to, the grant of asylum, some news stories about this attorney, and I actually had it circled on the paper, all my objections to relevancy, because they never interviewed the Sri Lankan interpreter, and the only person they did interview actually helps their case. Says that, yeah, that I didn't work for this attorney when the Sri Lankan cases came in, and B, I trusted the Sri Lankan cases more than the Chinese cases because they were literally making up fake documents, telling them which churches to go to get baptized. I mean, it was bad. A person of Chinese descent would come in to the office, say that you wanted help getting legal status, and they would pick one of these like 3 claims that were very popular and getting approved at the time very easily, which were, forced sterilization from China, Chinese Christians, that type of, there may have been one more type of claim, and they would just kind of make everything up and then coach them on how to answer the questions. And they actually described the whole process when they interviewed these paralegals. And when you read through the process, it didn't match what happened with my clients. For example, in the fake claims, the office would send a translator, would have the translator prep them, and then send the translator with them to the asylum office. They did use that translator that the office hired, but they didn't practice with them. They weren't coached on what to say. So that was a huge difference. So basically the government, USCIS, United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, based the fact that these people, and this is literally the judge's words today, had the unfortunate fact that they hired this lawyer who was indicted and convicted for immigration fraud, and that the government saying that means all of the cases were fraudulent. And in fact, that's not even what the evidence said that they submitted. And what's difficult with this case is it started this part of the section of the case where after their M400, their naturalization was denied and they were put in court. That started in 2016. That's when they hired us. And it took a while. We had to order their Freedom of Information Act files, so their whole immigration files, review it. We had a lot of meetings with them discussing what did you talk about with the lawyer, walk us through the meetings. And, today they're sitting here looking at me like, I met this lawyer in November of 2009. That is over 13 years ago, if I can do my math correctly. which you can't always count on. So over 13 years ago, I met with this guy, and this is what happened. And like, they were remembering the best they can, and we prepared, but I was just nervous because, look, there's a reason in a criminal case we have a right to a speedy trial. And one of those reasons is because witness memories fade. And you don't, in removal proceedings, anyone who testifies at any trial is considered a witness. So even if the case is about you, your own memory can fade. Plus, she was possibly going to have to relive this traumatic event that happened to her. And, I didn't, of course, want that to happen. So in 2017, we had our first hearing with the immigration court, and this is called the master hearing. And I've mentioned this before, and that they're normally kind of pointless and short. In this case, it actually mattered because this is one of the rare occasions where normally it's kind of like verbatim or just like not verbatim on like a repeat, where I just say, we admit the facts alleged and we concede removability. So what that means is, on the notice to appear, the charging document that placed them into removal proceedings, the government makes these factual allegations about why you shouldn't be allowed to remain in the U.S., and then has to charge you with a statute, a section of the law that says why you should be removed from the U.S. And normally people in that position, unless you have a green card or in status, you have to concede removability. It might not be the right ground of removability sometimes. In this case, it was based on fraud or misrepresentation, but there were 8 factual allegations. We denied 2 of them. And the 2 were that they made up that the asylum claim was fake, and that so therefore they are not removable. And the government served 2 evidence packages on us, which showed us how aggressive they were going to be and how seriously they were taking this whole matter of Operation Fiction Writer. So we really prepped. I went through everything with a fine-tooth comb, and this case was supposed to have a conference to figure out what was going on. That got canceled and rescheduled just for the individual hearing. And then it got rescheduled because of COVID. And then finally, it got rescheduled to today, except the court never sent me a notification. And the only reason we even knew is because my clients were checking online, because there's a way you enter your alien registration number and you can see when your next court date is, which is great. And first of all, it's not binding online. The papers they serve on you are. But the problem was, I can't check for every single client every day. It's their duty to send us. So had we not known about today, we would have been able to reopen the case, but it would have been a whole pain in the butt. So if you know how to check your alien registration number, all you have to do, and let's see if I could put it in a banner here. You know what? If you're watching, I'll put it wherever you're watching from, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, I'll put it in the comments section. Basically, the website you go to, you type in your alien registration number, and your next court date should be there. And if it's different than what your lawyers told you or what you thought it was, you want to clarify it with the court. So we ended up, after all these years, not having as much time to prepare. And we were having trouble because my clients were remembering things differently, because these are we're talking about insignificant facts. We're talking about things that you never thought you'd have to remember. So some attorney you met 13 years ago for an hour and a half, tell us what happened. Who did you talk to? How many people were in the office? What day did you go? Where did you go? A lot of those things that it gets complicated. So we practiced all of those, and we were ready. Literally hours of practicing this week. And I even did a summary prep of my client's asylum claim in case it came down to, okay, well, we want to make sure her claim is real too. And again, this entire time I'm thinking the government hasn't proved, they haven't met their burden, which was to prove by clear and convincing evidence that my clients had knowledge of fraud and that their claim was fake. So I was ready to go, guns blazing. And the judge always lets the government attorney and I talk right before we start the case. And I was shocked. She's surprising, happily shocked her, that she said, well, we are going to rest on the papers and defer to the judge. And I was like, so are you saying you haven't met your burden? And she's like, well, yes, we're saying, like, basically she didn't want to say it. No, we haven't met our burden, but that's what she was saying. And I was like, she's like, we're not asking for testimony from any of your clients. We think that, we didn't put them into removal proceedings, meaning certain people, just like, only a prosecutor can charge a criminal defendant with a crime or a person with a crime. Only there's the judge, DHS, Department of Homeland Security, or USCIS can put somebody into deportation proceedings. And in this case, it was USCIS because the N-400 was the naturalization. So DHS was telling me this morning, well, you know what? After thorough review of the file, and of course we submitted proof too, we don't think this was one of the cases. We think that they just kind of got unlucky. So the judge comes on off the record, asks us, well, what did you guys discuss? The government attorney states her position, and the judge says, yeah, I really don't think that there's anything here. I think that, it's unfortunate it took this long, that your clients were just really unlucky. They found this other lawyer, and I don't need to hear a legal argument. We were just kind of walking through the logistics of how to make sure we dismiss it properly so that this issue doesn't become another issue. Because our clients had talked about this with us before when the government started dismissing cases again. Those are cases when I've come on before and I said, a case was dismissed without prejudice. What that means is that nobody decided, there's no findings of fact that the client is here legally or they're in lawful status. Basically, the government is just dismissing the case, and they could be put back into proceedings if usually they dismiss it because you have a path to a green card or something. If you don't end up getting the green card, like if it's based on marriage and the marriage ends. So if this case was dismissed without prejudice and they went to file for naturalization again, or they traveled abroad and tried to re-enter, and there was no finding saying there was no fraud, then these clients may have had a problem. So the judge did it perfectly, and she cleared the language with me before we went on the record and said that the government has not met its burden of proof to show that to sustain the factual allegations and the charge of removability, and therefore granting counsel's motion to dismiss with prejudice. So, and that was it. And that basically means, so if they apply for naturalization now, and this comes up, we're going to be submitting the termination order with the naturalization certificate. But basically, we can explain to them, you can't get into this whole fraud thing now. It's been determined. The judge had a trial on the merits, had all the paperwork, said the government didn't sustain it, the government agreed, and that's it. And it shouldn't prevent them from getting their naturalization certificates and becoming U.S. citizens. So I'm honestly relieved. I'm a little tired because I have another case coming on at 1:30 today. It's December 29th. I was a little shocked that I had two cases today, but another asylum place that I'm ready to go into battle for, hoping I ultimately don't have to go into battle. But nevertheless, I'll be ready. And if I have time, I'll talk about it later. Otherwise, I might be talking about it in the new year, but I'm sure I actually have a very good feeling about that case as well. So I'm hoping to get there, and that has its own interesting issue that I've not talked about before. So, lesson to be learned in this case. First and foremost, and I've said this before, I'll say this again, make sure if you hire someone to do your immigration paperwork or to file for any immigration benefits, that it is in fact a lawyer. This guy was a lawyer, so my clients check that box. Sometimes you just never know when you get unlucky, and there is nothing you can do. But if you have any idea that what is happening shouldn't be happening or something feels off, even if it works out at first, it's going to catch up to you. In immigration, no statute of limitations, meaning 20 years can pass, 30 years can pass, and then finally somebody over at USCIS or DHS or CBP or ICE notices something about your case, and suddenly you're facing deportation. And it's scary that can happen, which again is another reason, the second part of the lesson, if you're eligible for naturalization, apply for it as soon as possible, because that's the only way. You can't get put in removal proceedings. Like I said, their son got lucky, so he was out of the case. He wasn't even there today. Everyone else kind of got caught up in it, and that's how it started. But I just want to reiterate, that doesn't mean you should be afraid to file for naturalization, especially if you have no reason to believe there's anything wrong. Sometimes that's just the way life is, but that is going to be your best safeguard to ever having a problem in the future, whether you knew about it or it's something that comes up in the future. So I am super excited for my clients today. I know they've waited a really long time just to clear their name of any wrongdoing. And this is really a process for them going on since 2009, and then they thought it was over, and then all of a sudden it came roaring back. So finally they can rest easy. And one of the daughters is actually now in the military. So a U.S. military member was being dragged through the mud for this as well for no reason. But like I said, and I always say this to my clients, the truth comes out in the end. You just got to be positive, stay confident, positive, and have faith that if you're telling the truth, then it's everything's going to be fine. And this case is just another case that proves that concept. So that is all for today for this, not for me. I have more to do today. Thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like us and follow us on Facebook and YouTube, Instagram, wherever you get this. As I mentioned, once I finish this video, I'm going to go to the comment section everywhere and put in how to look up your own court case online in immigration court, just in case you don't have an attorney or you do and nobody gets the notices for one reason or another, because that's been happening. And don't forget to hit that share button if you found this video to be helpful or know somebody that may find it helpful. So hope you all had happy holidays, have a happy new year, and we'll see you most likely in the new year if I have time later today. Thanks again.